Morning everybody. It's absolutely great to be with you in this beautiful city of Prague. Prague was on my bucket list for many, many years as a city that I'd never got round to visiting and was determined to get to. And I only first visited earlier this year and fell in love with it. So it's wonderful. It's wonderful to be back. But I'm going to start with an apology. And it's an apology about, I guess, how things are so broken in our world today. I was initially due to fly out from London Heathrow on the 2 o'clock flight to Prague tomorrow. That was cancelled, so they could potentially then put me on the 5 o'clock flight. That was also cancelled, so they put me on the 8:30 flight, which was then an hour and a half late, meaning I finally got to my hotel at 2:30 in the morning. So my initial apology at the outset is, if you see me yawning, it's not because I'm bored, it's not because I don't want to be with you, it's that I only arrived here a few hours ago. So my apologies in advance for that. As Peter said, I'm wondering whether there are some intermediate steps on the way to the sort of world or cities that you want to create. And I think there may be. And I'm going to sketch out a few that apply to my country and to the city, London, that I live in. And to begin to do that, I need to take you all the way back to 2016, a full 7 years ago, where the UK decided to hold a referendum on whether or not it should remain a member of the European Union. It was quite a lengthy campaign. I think most of us thought that once the decision was made, that the resolution and executing it wouldn't be a lengthy matter at all. How wrong we were. It didn't just dominate 2016, it dominated about 3.5, 4 years of internal debate afterwards. The topic of whether the UK should remain in the European Union or secede and pilot its own future divided families and friends, divided different regions and areas of the UK, and actually divided libertarians and classical liberal-minded people as well. My own think tank, the Institute of Economic Affairs, which is a free market think tank, was by no means united on the question of succession. In fact, I think probably in my decade or more at the Institute of Economic Affairs, where I've done quite a lot of media and television and radio interviews, my favourite of all time was actually going up against one of my own staff on CNN on referendum night, who took the view that the UK should remain in the EU, and I took the view that we should not. And the reason I want to hark back to the EU referendum is not because I remain absolutely certain or convinced that leave was the right decision, or that it is the decision I'd take again if we voted again. It's that I think the catchphrase of the Leave campaign, and credited with many as being the very clever meme that got us over the line, was "take back control." That was the message that was put in every pro-Brexit advertisement poster: take back control. And it seems to me that that's a kind of meme, a feeling, a sentiment that's going to be shared by a vast number of you who are interested in free cities. It's about taking back control. Control has sat in legacy institutions that appear slow, ponderous, inflexible, not able to respond to the actual needs and desires of its citizens and subjects. Control should be taken back. And I think that's some sort of libertarian rallying cry. And I want to recount to you a story from a little over 30 years ago, when I was at university, and I was trying to make up my own mind about what I should think about the European Union. And this was just at the time of the creation of the single market. The idea was that there would be essentially a single regulatory structure. So we all had the same neat and tidy rules for all of the different things that we might wish to buy. It still hasn't applied to services, but it was going to apply to goods. And I can remember the story that my brilliant economics tutor, he was an Italian professor, told me from the stage at the front of the lecture hall. And he said, I could see a slightly ironic smile appearing on his face. He said, without being too Stalinist, I'm going to talk to you about tractor production. And he did indeed talk to us about tractor production. And I thought this does sound like a bit like the old communists talking about tractor production. But he told the story, which at the time I felt was quite compelling in favour of the EU single market. Now, I'm going to get some of the details wrong, so don't quote me chapter and verse. I didn't take contemporaneous notes at the time, and it was 30 years ago. But he literally put a picture of a tractor on the overhead projector and went through all of the different rules and regulations that you had to comply with in order for the tractor to be legal and sellable in each different jurisdiction. And I can remember the gist of them, even if I get some of them a little bit wrong. I think there was a rule in, I believe it was Belgium, that the thickness of the front windscreen of the tractor had to be at least a centimetre thick, or some such like. Why was slightly unclear. Until you realised, I think, that the Belgian glass industry was the only industry anywhere in the world that manufactured 1 centimetre thick window paints. So there was not so much a free market, but a lobbying attempt to keep that industry going. In, I think it was Spain and Portugal, I might be wrong, there were different rules about what the ratio of the front wheels of the tractor needed to be to the back wheels of the tractor. It was something like there had to be 3 to 4 in Portugal, but 4 to 5 in Spain. The one that I remember very clearly was in Finland. In Finland, every tractor had to have an escape hatch on the top of it. Why Finnish tractor drivers couldn't just get out of the side door like all other drivers in the European Union remained a mystery, but nevertheless there was a separate rule for Finland, an escape hatch on the top. And the concept behind the EU, and one that I'm going to concede I initially found attractive, was we've got to get rid of all of these different rules and regulations. They're a protectionist racket. If only we had and could agree on one rule book for tractors, and indeed any other manufactured good or service that you might sell across the European Union, that will ease and flow trade. And I found that quite an attractive option at the time. But I think what morphed me into a take-back controller and a keen Brexiteer was this regulation became ever more heavy-handed and indeed wasn't neutral itself. You started to get protective regulations that were about defending, if not narrowly the Belgian market, then the EU market as a whole. And I think my sentiments were shared by a good number of my fellow countrymen. Indeed, 52% voted for us to take back control. Now, why am I giving you that Brexit history? What's that got to do with your main topic of freer histories, other than perhaps a slight communality of narrative? Well, I think that once a country has decided to take back control, it raises a lot of interesting questions, some of which you guys might well have the answers to. Because once you've said you want control taken back, we've started to have a series of debates about what that might mean. Have we taken back control from Brussels only to give all of that power to bureaucrats and politicians in Westminster? Is that what we really mean taking back control to be? Just transferring one block of politicians a few hundred miles away to one block of politicians nearer to home? And I think that the Brexit debate too has revealed to us just how inflexible and centralised my country of the United Kingdom is, and how diverse it is. Very different attitudes in different parts of the UK, but an inability for those different attitudes or preferences to reflect difference in policy or governance. And let me start by a statistic that I find absolutely shocking in a country as large as the United Kingdom. That fully 95% of tax and spending decisions are made by central government. 95% made by Westminster. A rounding error when you're looking at local authorities, got a few of the pennies in each pound. Very, very difficult for them to chart a different course. And you'll find in a whole range of areas, even if devolved governments, local councils wanted to pursue a different course, they're under so many national mandates to have to provide X numbers of this or Y numbers of that. We have national stipulations on how frequently you need to collect refuse from domestic properties. Not even that is devolved to local authorities. So 95% in roundabout terms is what is collected and spent by central government. If you were to look at, say, the US or Germany, it's much closer to 50% being central government tax and spend. And a whole range of different approaches to policy that we have been wholly incapable of allowing flexibility within our system. And I want to pick on one area, a highly contentious issue, not just in the United Kingdom, but tends to be a contentious issue, I think, in many European countries now, and that's immigration. Now, for you free cities people, this isn't much of a problem, right? You voluntarily turn up into the country, there might be criteria of membership, but in the legacy structures, this is causing an awful lot of angst and grief, and it tends to be, at least in the UK, the major cities which take a fairly liberal approach on immigration, wants more people to come in, and perhaps the outlying areas that take a rather dimmer view on immigration. I'd have to say, even though there are all sorts of complexities about what the criteria might be of immigrants coming in, how you're properly measuring refugee or asylum status against simply immigrant status, I basically take a fairly liberal view on immigration. And oftentimes, and I think this is the debate really often right across Europe, you'll find politicians saying, immigration's too high and we can't cope. Our health systems can't cope. Our education systems can't cope. The road network or the transport infrastructure can't cope with all of these vast numbers of people coming in. You'll notice that all the things that can't cope have one thing in common. They're run by the state. They're run by the government. Have you ever heard a supermarket complaining that it has too many customers? Have you ever heard of a pub or a restaurant claiming there's too many people who want to buy their beer or food? A rarity indeed. A cinema claiming that there's too many people who want to watch their movies. No. It's the state functions that apparently can't cope. So I wonder whether in my own city of London we need to start to take a rather more imaginative approach. And although I'm not going to in any way suggest to you that a huge city like London is about to become independent of the UK or a free city in the way that you would understand it, I think that there are some big changes that could be made if only the narrative was set out and our politicians had a bit of vision. And let me just paint it back. You were asked by Peter at the start how many of you have been to a conference like this before, once, twice, 3, or even 4 times. How many of you have visited London? Yeah, I'm going to say that's somewhere around 2/3, 3/4. London is obviously the capital of the United Kingdom, but it's an international cosmopolitan city in its own right. In fact, quite often when economists are looking to make measurements about the UK economy, average earnings, average house prices, economic growth, levels of wealth, a good number, an increasing number, actually say we should kind of take London out of the equation because it stilts the overall UK picture so much if you include London, which is essentially a cosmopolitan international metropolis that just so happens to be planted in the southeast of England. It is affluent and successful by international and certainly by UK standards, by May 2023, it was one of only 2 areas of the United Kingdom that had recovered all of the economic losses from the COVID pandemic. On average, a Londoner is subsidising the rest of the United Kingdom to the tune of £3,000 per Londoner per year is coming from the average Londoner to support other areas. And if you did remove London entirely from UK statistics, then the United Kingdom as a whole would have a lower per capita GDP than any US state or than any West German or Dutch region. So London is big and it is rich. In fact, if it were to become an independent country, if you were to hypothesize that, its economy would be larger than all but 12 EU states. It would be about, although I've called my talk Singapore-on-Thames, London's about twice the size of Singapore geographically, with 50% higher population. So independence for London. Will that happen? No time soon. I can tell you that. But here's a number to conjure with, and it's small, but it's not trivial. Opinion polls indicate that about 11% of Londoners would favour London becoming an independent country. Right, that's only 11%, but that's near as damn it 1 million people volunteering that suggestion to opinion poll. Not going to happen, not going to be on the ballot paper anytime soon. But I would suggest to you that's a non-trivial level of support. And I've got 2 suggestions for how, even if London doesn't become an independent country or a free city, it could at least become a freer one. One is around tax and spending decisions, which, although I would like nearly all of these devolved straight to the market rather than different and smaller local bodies, I think a second best solution is actually to devolve them to smaller and more local bodies, so you at least get competition between different geographical areas. Doesn't happen perfectly in the United States, but happens a bit. If California starts to screw up, people move to Texas. Okay, it's still Texan bureaucrats and politicians making decisions, but at least you've got some sort of mobility, ability to switch, far more than in the United Kingdom, as I say, where 95% of the tax and spending decisions are the same. So that needs to be devolved down. You can work out some equation or algorithm, if you wish, for the richer parts of the UK economy to subsidise the poorer parts, but much more tax and spend at a local level, much more regulatory decision-making at a local level. London is unusual as a capital city and it has so much in it. It is the political centre, the financial centre, and the media centre of the UK, as well as the cultural centre of the UK. Perhaps we want to regulate that differently. And crucially, and this is where I think there could be support for this within the UK and within London, immigration. Why does the UK need one immigration rule? In essence, in the UK, you need a national insurance number, we call it, in order to be able to legally work. But there's no particular reason why you couldn't get a visa or an agreement to work in London that might not apply to Birmingham or Edinburgh or Glasgow. All right, there might be a little bit of bleed on the extreme outskirts of London, but I don't see why the people of London, if they wish to be, say, liberal on immigration or have a view about the sort of people that they would like to welcome in and work there, you could simply attach the letter L to the end of your national insurance certificate to show that you could work in London, but perhaps not other parts of the United Kingdom. So my advice and my hope, following on from the last talk, is reach for the stars. I'm fascinated by this free cities idea. I think it could go somewhere and I think it could transform the world. So by no means settle for second best. But sometimes you do need to cross the chasm in 2 leaps. You actually need to take a step forward. And I think the best way to do that is to devolve power and to look at some of the cities across Europe now. And if not making them wholly free, in the way we heard from sort of Tice's opening brilliant speech, at least make them freer. And if you could start with London, one of the great cities in Europe, and allow London and its people to go some way to taking back control from the national government, not just from the Brussels government, then I'm not promising you utopia overnight. I'm not saying all of your plans will come to fruition immediately, but I think that could be a useful and achievable step on the pathway that you want to head down. Thanks very much for your time and attention.